I'm gonna start the recording since we have actual content to talk about today, but yes, I'm gonna share, yeah, I'll share an email on Clean about this spam that's going out and try to warn people. But we have other things to talk about, I know, so we can go into that now. Great to see you. You and Eric unmuted.
No, thanks for the heads up on this, Gina and Katie. I think it's, yeah, I appreciate that. I haven't got anything, but I'll definitely be alerted to it. So definitely appreciate the heads up.
One question on these emails is when you pull down and look at the sender's email address, is it legit?
They get
Yeah.
access to your email and send it out from your email, so that
Right.
because that's something I looked at and it
Yep.
was, oh, it says it's from Emily, check. Oh, it actually is from Emily. It's even giving me a preview of her LinkedIn page. You know,
Yeah, it was from Gina for me when I got it. Like, totally checked the email and everything and directly from Gina. So yeah, they're getting your, you go to the link, it takes you to a Canva link that says, here's the PDF, like open, you can open the document from here, but then it takes you to a OneDrive, like a Microsoft document sort of. And so, especially for those of us, I guess, I don't know if maybe you use Gmail, like if it would be different for you or not, but those of us who use the Microsoft, like email, Outlook and things like that, then they ask you to like sign in to view the document. And that's when they're able to get your login information for your, like, all your Microsoft stuff, which includes your email. So then they use your email to send this out to your contacts.
So actually, I want to send this to the university that I'm working with. So it corrupts then your Microsoft account? Is that what actually then happens?
They literally get your login, like when it pops up with the Microsoft login, you log in and they take your credentials and then log into your email and start sending people this email from your email. So they have
apparently stop you from receiving emails and do some other things, funky things like that. So yeah, they're just messing with your email or your account. And again, probably trying to figure out what else they have access to through that login.
Yep.
Yeah, they applied a rule to it so that anything I sent out, before Microsoft auto locked it, and anything I received was going into this like random folder I've never used. So I technically was getting emails, but none of them were showing up in my inbox. They were just automatically being filtered out a way where I didn't even know to look for them. And that's one way where, like, even if you are still logging into your email while they're using it for nefarious means, you might not know that they are actively using it for this, because you could be using it normally in addition to them using it, and just, again, they're hiding what they're doing. But lucky me, all of this was going on while I was away at a conference.
awful.
Even worse.
I'm so sorry, Carolyn. It's really not fun to deal with.
I'm sorry that I spread it to you as well.
Oh yeah, it's very, very believable. I believed it. I was excited that Cleo might be doing something, and I was curious and clicked on a link and thought that I had just gotten logged out of Microsoft. And
basically all
information.
Listen, I've been through that know before, like, phishing training and all that, and basically all of the things they tell you to do to check this passed.
Apply to this. Yep, totally. I think that I'm pretty good at spotting that stuff, and this is not it. Gosh. Well, is there anything positive happening? Any other announcements that people want to share that are maybe good news, or events or anything?
We're sharing a family event called Happy Halloween at Chabot here in the Bay Area in Oakland on a Sunday. So we're going to have asking the kids to dress up in costume. We were able to arrange some free admission for kids, and then we'll make like recycled trick-or-treat bags, face painting. We're gonna we have the drone footage that I've shared with on some of the calls with some of the schools. We're looking at how to make schools greener in Oakland through kind of having high school students look at their campuses from the top down, and also just assess their campuses inside through, you know, assessing their programs and things. So we're going to showcase that activity and an event and have a lot of partners coming. So that'll be a fun thing. If you're, I don't think any of you are in the Bay Area, but if you were, you'd be invited. You are invited. It's a long trip.
I would love to go to the Bay Area for that.
Definitely sounds fun. I put it in the chat really quick. Clean is having a webinar this semester. I think we've mentioned this on a call before, but we are kind of revamping our professional development offerings. So we've reduced the webinars, the number of webinars we're doing each semester. We're just going to do one instead of our normal 4, so that we can kind of spend some of that time and energy towards changing things up a bit and adding an asynchronous PD option for people who are interested in understanding how to teach weather and climate, or sorry, climate and energy topics. And we are still doing the introduction to clean webinar this semester, November 8th. So coming up in the next couple weeks, we're going to start kind of advertising it more widely now. So if you are able, please spread the word. Thank you.
I just put a link in the chat to our Excel Summit convened by Clean, which registration opened for a little while ago. We have a launch event happening on November 16th that I've been working really hard on, and some of the folks here have been working really hard on pulling together. We're gonna be funding 5 working groups who propose topic ideas about various things. You can read more about it in the link. And at the launch event, they're going to give some lightning talks about those topics, and then we're going to invite folks to into breakout rooms where they can join the working groups and help spark some ideas about those topics. So please register for that if you're available. Katie Wolfson has her hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna share out that if you're in the Boulder, Colorado area, 2 Saturdays from now on November 4th, we have our Super Science Saturday event. So it's our big public science celebration. It's the first time we're bringing it back in person since the pandemic, since 2019. So that's really exciting. So from if you're in the area, 10 to 4, we'll have all sorts of different groups up here at doing tables and activities. We'll be outside doing weather measurements. We'll have the Jeff and Paige kids concert. We'll have our scientists doing big science demos and things like that. So so it's super fun, and we're really excited to be right back in person. So if you're in the area, come check it out.
Cool. Lots of good events happening. All right, well, obviously we can keep using the chat, but we've taken up a lot of Eric and Frank's time for important conversation, but I know that we're already at 11:23, so I will hand it over to Eric and Frank now to talk about COP.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. And no, this is really a follow-up that we get kind of this thread about how to participate in COP28 or the COP process remotely. So it's really an informal discussion, and I think, you know, it's something that Frank and I have been exploring, and so we thought we'd just kind of dig a little bit deeper on a couple avenues for doing that. And I'll let Frank. We have some slides we can share. Frank, I'll let you kind of jump in and introduce.
Okay, I'm gonna do a share screen here. Hopefully this will work. Okay, does that work? Good. Yeah. So just adjust something here on my screen. There we go. So I just want to walk through a few quick slides to frame out our conversation. one of the things before we jump into this that's interesting about this particular COP that happened fairly recently. I was under the impression that the COP28 or 29, I'm actually talking about the next COP, sorry, but COP29 was going to be in Australia, and Eric and I quickly discovered no, Australia was putting in a bid for it, which is too bad. I was kind of looking forward to a trip to Australia. It is actually slated for a couple of Eastern, it's actually the Eastern Europe's chance to host a COP. And unfortunately, the two countries, I think Azerbaijan and Bulgaria, are both within the EU, and Russia has decided to block their bid. And so there is a lot of question right now in terms of what's going to happen with COP29. Now, I know we're talking 28, but I'm bringing this up about 29. The default position is always, well, we'll move it to Bonn, because that's where UNFCCC, where the Secretariat headquarters are. The other possibility that apparently is being discussed is breaking it up into smaller conferences, which kind of goes, I bring this up because it kind of follows along the line of what Eric and I are talking about in a way. I want to just zip through, if I can get coordinated, zip through a couple of about four, maybe five slides. So what we want to throw out here after I do this little short dog and pony show is deal with the question that you see there on the screen, which is how can the Clean Network support remote engagement with UN climate events, which may be particularly important if we end up with a distributed conference next year. Just a quick bit of background here. There's oftentimes a lot of questions about who exactly goes to these conferences. And so that you're seeing right there, the four parties, or the four major players in an average UNCC event. You've got the party negotiators, you've got press, you've got support staff, and then most importantly, for what we're talking about, you got the observers. And I throw this slide up because what's important here when we're talking about getting people remotely involved with UNFCCC or UNCC events is expanding the number of people who can in some way be an observer. And what an observer is just simply an official representative of civil society groups, whether they're NGOs or businesses or what have you, who actually have four functions. They, first of all, are observing what's going on with the negotiations. They're reporting back to their communities and groups as far as what's what took place. In those rare instances where you can get access or be able to speak publicly, there's advocating for your particular group. And then most importantly, there's networking. And again, that's, to me, is one of the really exciting parts about having been an observer in the past, is that ability to just connect with other observers from other parts of the world, learn what they're doing, figure out how to make alliances, and so on. The one question whenever I talk to groups about this idea of remote participation, it's like, why bother? I mean, the UN is basically bankrupt in terms of being co-opted. Everything happens slowly, etc. And so my answer to that are these 2 points right here, which is that one of the things I felt coming back is the need for a lot more grassroots awareness of and participation in the process, just to create a basic understanding of what's taking place, as well as some support for it. And sort of stemming out of that, the the fact that more grassroots participation you have, the more chance you have of ensuring that outcomes of the negotiations are both equitable and effective. Again, this particular COP29 being where it is, there's a real tendency just for a lot of climate action groups just to simply say boycott it, refuse to go. And my sense of it, the matter is, no, this is exactly the point where eyes and ears need to be on what's taking place, lest we get pushed into something that is not very palatable. This is the same list we had up last week, and this again is just essentially avenues for remote engagement, all the way from being the Lone Ranger up there, a person watching from behind their computer at home, up to an effort that I recently came across that's called local sock takes. And this is an effort by ICLEI, which is governments for local governments for sustainability, to actually provide data for the stock takes that, like the one taking place this year, and deriving that data from local community meetings. So talking about institutions or city climate action plans, and trying to do a stock take on those plans. And then of course I have a number of other options in there that I like to call hybrid options. The virtual bridge gathering, the climate cafes, alternative conferences, community event clusters. When I say hybrid, it's really important to capture some of the, if you will, the COP observer experience by being with a group of people as you do the observing. Oh, one quick thing I want to point out in here. There is a link up here that I sent to everybody last week connecting to COP28. This is this year's installment of an online portal to all of the recorded live stream and other online resources related to the COP. So watch, so the link's there, and that's going to be evolving a lot during the next few weeks. Okay, so I promised I'd keep this short. And so recycling back to the first question actually that Eric and I want to throw out is, how can the Clean Network support the development of some of those avenues that were on the past slide? Some of those avenues for remote engagement. Those avenues. Okay, so Eric, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and maybe just to frame that, thanks Frank for introducing these different kind of ways that we're thinking about how communities remotely can be involved, and is there value in just thinking about it from each of your perspectives, your professional lives and personal lives, like is there value in the COP process? Frank, you have that slide too showing, I think it comes after the one just with the engagement has increased over time. There's kind of a yeah, that one, that guy, yeah. So it's just interesting to look at this graph and look at how over time, as COP has evolved, that more and more people have become engaged in different ways, and that there's different stakeholders, like Frank was pointing out. But the bigger, the question I have for each of you in the group is there value? Do you see value? I know we talked a little bit about, the directive of clean and some of the things that we're working on are sort of domestically focused. So there's that side of our jobs that we need to kind of stay focused on what's happening in the US. But then, there's also this idea that we're a global community and that there's value. I guess for me, my interest in in the UN goes back to my childhood. I think it was one of the things that I thought about doing, as a career when I was in college, and was international relations, diplomacy, some way of bringing folks together. My mom was multilingual, was fluent in Spanish and French. So I kind of grew up with that sensibility. And also that environmental side of me was fostered by my parents, and kind of really kind of came to I learned about climate and climate change when I was in college, a couple pivotal events. So those things, it's always been fascinating, the UN process and involvement, and that global the idea that we are a global community. But there's we've talked over time about the challenges of the UN structure. There's a lot of things about it that aren't necessarily inclusive and accessible and equitable. But again, the bigger question, I guess, too, for me is there value in engagement in COP, and where do you see opportunities in your careers, personal lives, and how might, if there's thoughts about how it's not accessible or how it could be changed? Because I think as we're seeing these observers and civil society get more and more engaged, and the digital world kind of expanding, and platforms like this, there's more and more opportunity to sort of make it more equitable, and not just make it focused on a 2-week event, but as we know, a year-round, kind of the way that Clean approaches this with our webinars. We're engaged in these conversations throughout the year. We're collaborating and partnering. So yeah, just the value of COP. Be curious to hear what folks think. And I know
I can talk about it a little bit. Yeah, I was just because I was like, well, wait for the long pause. Yeah, I mean, I think like I think COP's, really important. And I think there's a lot of like, misunderstanding or lack of awareness around it a lot of times. Like, I think, like, at least for in kind of my world, like at NCAR, giving public tours and field trips and that kind of stuff, like we'll get questions about like IPCC report kind of thing. And like, that's honestly like where a lot of our scientists are really involved, right? Being at NCAR and working with climate models and things like that, that we can kind of easily tie of like, oh yeah, like we have models and scientists who are working on parts of those aspects of those reports that go to IPCC. But that's what the science, right? That's kind of like what's happening in the science, and what we think might be happening, could be happening in the future. And then there's this whole other piece of what do you do about it, right? And like we're like, I think COP28 is like, COP is one of those things that it's, really is kind of getting more into that like policy action. What are people's commitments and that global aspect? And so like that's the part that I think is important for the public and for students, which is kind of like my audience that I'm talking to, right? To help make those connections of like, it isn't just a US thing, right? This is a global thing, right? And there are different groups that have more influence over it because of power dynamics and things like that. But like, there's all these other perspectives and all these other considerations, and like what's okay for one country might not work for another country. And it gets messy and confusing. And so I think that piece of the story is important. And that piece of the work to be done is important. And so, I've more just kind of like heard about the things happening at COP. I have never been really involved or actively involved with something like this. And it's something that I feel like our group talks about, like, oh yeah, we should have something about that. But, we're figuring out what that is still, and what do we have capacity for on our team, and like what's our role in that. So I appreciate y'all like laying out like here's different ways, right? Because that's the thing where I know we've talked about in past meetings, right? Where I was like, oh yeah, that'd be great to do, and then I'm like, like we have a lot of events and things like that of us kind of getting back on board and my team rebuilding. That I think that I'm curious to see where it goes. Basically, like I think it is important. And I don't know exactly like what is the best role, or, really there's probably not just one best role, right? Y'all outlined a whole bunch of different ideas. So I'll stop talking there, but that's my train of thought.
I want to throw something in with that, because I know, Katie, you represent UCAR, and the Science Center. And I'm thinking about, again, the list that I gave you, and it ranges from individual participation, the lone ranger sitting behind their computer at home, to the community meetings that look like they could actually generate something of use in the negotiation. And then the sort of middle layer in there, which is the hybrid events, the hybrid events that, among other things, require a place to meet. And I say that because, first of all, with COP26, the green zone, which was the publicly accessible zone of the UN campus there, was in the Glasgow Science Center. It was actually enabled by a character by the name of Henry McKee, who is with Museums for the Future. And he's been active in the past. He's not quite so enthusiastic anymore, but he's been active in the past about getting museums and science centers and all sorts of public institutions like that, essentially trying to form kind of, if you will, a hub for remote engagement. So there's, I think when you look at this in terms of how folks that are involved with Clean could be helpful in this process, there's first of all the question of content for such things as the portal that I've talked with everybody about. And like, for instance, Katie, one of the things we've got at the back end of the portal is an, I quote, exhibit area, which includes some things that you folks have produced, as well as PRI. So there's that part of things. But then the other part of things is how we can look at some of the institutions that we're associated with and encourage them to be able to provide an opportunity for people in the local community to connect with what's going on in this particular case, Dubai, or wherever it's going to be next year, so on. Oh, and by the way, their PDX Bridge to COP25, that was hosted by a science museum and a liberal arts college. So anyway, throw all of that out as something more to chew on.
One thing that I'm just sort of thinking about other models for how that might happen. I don't know if I think most of you probably heard at some point about these climate teach-ins that I'm trying to think of his name, David. Yeah, I'm missing his name right now, but he was at a university and they were trying to promote, they provided a template for people to create at their universities these teach-in experiences on a particular day. So there was a target date in which they hope people would do it around, but then they had provided some training for how people might set up such an event at their universities. So could Clean sort of think through different templates for how you might encourage, as Frank suggested, encouraging other places or organizations to run such an event? Could Clean provide a template for how to go about this at the maybe the individual level and the small community level, sort of at maybe 3 or 4 different levels, so that people could then grab the template that works best for them? That's just an idea because Clean can't run all of these events. But given the experience that the community has, we could potentially put together some templates for how to run these events. So that's, and I think there are other examples of a group providing a framework for seeding events around a particular topic, around a particular time frame, to make a larger collective impact. So anyway, so that's just an idea to throw out there.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Tamara. We've participated in the teach-in the last 2 years. And I think the value, like for us, is like one, they have some examples, and we've done virtual like panels or virtual talks for ours. But one of the values for us as an organization is that it's basically like they create a map where you can then look for different events, right, on that map. So you can find something local to you or virtual, and then they're kind of marketing it as collectively through that teach-in. And then they do have that target date. I think last year they did it as a whole like week period or a week or two, and they might be doing that again this year, where they're like, this is the teach-in day, but like your events can be anywhere in this window, kind of thing. And some of them are in person, some of them are virtual. And so it's kind of an opportunity to like kind of collectively market and spread awareness around those different opportunities without like taking it all on yourself. And so I think that is an interesting model to consider for this kind of thing. And, whether it's this year or like next year, thinking ahead, like COP, of like kind of organizing some like, a map where people can post, add their
I
own
think the
events
map is
to
a
it.
great idea because if
Yeah.
nothing else, it allows us clean to see who's engaged.
Well, Tamara, Tamara and Katie, one thing that's interesting about your idea is, I liken the project that the big project here to kind of building a global blue-green zone. So expanding what's there at the campus outwards. And as Eric's talking about, expanding it in time. One of the things that's interesting about that is not a case of reinventing the wheel. It's a case really of gathering the threads. And I say that because I've seen a lot of efforts out there that have been one-shot deals, but then they didn't document them. They didn't do a how-to guide. Yeah, I agree. That would be a really, I'm looking at what Clean usually does. I think this could be one way that Clean could really give something to this kind of effort.
And it might be worth trying to find out what the European version of Clean is. So Mark McCaffrey sort of has been part of that effort for time, and we've intersected with them occasionally, but they are much more of they are also an attempt to see these events of various kinds in all different kinds of places. So it might be worth seeing if they have anything that they, templates of that kind to build on.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Actually, I have a question kind of related to that, Tamara, that has anyone seen maybe I just
Emails?
fell off the email list, but
I know
has
I
anyone
said I
been
have not
having
seen
any
much from it.
meetings or-
I have not seen much from it recently either.
I haven't either. Okay, I was just curious if others.
But
I think part of what I appreciate about what you're saying, Tamara, is like looking for, analogous groups that are in our areas of work. That was, I've shared a number of times before, the idea of the climate analogs to California and learning about other parts of the world that are experiencing have similar climates to what we have here in California and are experiencing change, and are also, trying to be resilient and come up with strategies. So I think this kind of being able to kind of focus in on the human story as it relates to our work or our lived experiences can be really powerful. Tamara, you put me in touch with a colleague of yours from Chile, and he and I connected maybe a year ago. And there's another young man now that's in college in Stanford doing a semester abroad there. And so I'm hoping he's kind of, among other things, seeing what's happening with climate in Santiago, Chile, which is a climate like ours, and so those stories can be really a powerful way of understanding and networking with each other and this shared experience and shared strategy for coping, and then provide a model for global collaboration, which again, I think I really appreciate about the United Nations as an organization. It's may not be perfect, but it provides it's a great way to bring us together. So appreciate the conversation about other, what's the clean analog in Europe. I just posted something in chat. I'm doing some volunteer work with this group called Museum Expert, and we've been focusing a lot on centering museums and what the experience for public centers like museums was during COVID when they shut down, and a lot of them had huge staff reductions. But this upcoming webinar is a series that we're offering this idea of museums as lifeboats, that there's public convening spaces. So things like climate change and having what Frank and I are hoping will be an outcome maybe in the next year is museums as a venue to host some of these gatherings, virtual gatherings, local in person, but providing a platform for raising awareness about COP. So anyway, that might be of interest, and I'm hoping that we'll host another follow-on to the one that I posted that's even more directly connected to climate change. And so yeah, appreciate the thoughts. And Katie, what you were saying about, you're kind of coming into it to your position, and there's been some transition and trying to figure out, there's obviously the priorities of that, and then the larger context, how it might fit in. And I'm doing the same, with a lot of areas of work. You kind of think about how these all tie together and how you might move something like this forward. So it's been great, working with Frank to Frank, you're having this experience with COP over many years has been really a great learning opportunity for me.
In terms of the question of a European analog, one group that been trying to reach for a while, apparently they're having struggles getting started because they're relatively new, but the Office of Climate Education in Paris. They sound like a pretty good resource, but it sounds like they've had a few issues getting started, but still, I think they would be a good group to dovetail in with on a lot of this.
Is it European or is it French?
It is what the Office of Climate Education. It's in
Yeah, you
Paris.
said it was in Paris, but I was just wondering how
In
international.
Paris, it's part of the UN.
Okay.
So it's their attempt to actually do some ACE rather than.
It's
The other
interesting to
thing,
me. I was just going to chime in that I think the other thing that I'm just kind of thinking about, I'm like, why hasn't UCAR and NCAR done stuff in the past more so about this? And maybe they have done something, but we're such a big organization. It's possible some other group has been doing something. And then I don't have that history on it. But also, I think there's also a shift, like in my organization. I'm curious how many other organizations there's a shift too about, like, kind of going back to like a while back, we kind of had a discussion around like advocacy versus action and like what the difference is there. And I think there is kind of maybe a cultural shift going on too in terms of comfort level for organizations and museums or, agencies and things like that in terms of what they're comfortable with. Because I could see like a lot of times like this NCAR doesn't advocate for one policy or another. We provide like the information to make good policy based on science. But I just wonder how much of it is like we were involved and talked about IPCC because it was the science safe spot, versus if COP's getting more into policy and that kind of thing. But I see a shift right more towards climate action too, even within my organization and comfort level of like talking about that and supporting action on different things. And so I'm just curious. It's just kind of thinking out loud about like if other organizations have seen that shift also, and like what that would mean for COP as well and kind of public involvement for that.
I know I saw that shift in the museum space for sure. Like when I was started in informal education, late 90s, early 2000s, and was interested in bringing to the organization environmental education, climate change. And it was interesting because there was this, we're not a climate organization. We don't do advocacy action focused things. And then shortly thereafter, there was a executive director shift. And he prioritized climate. We ended up with a climate exhibit. We ended up kind of doing a ton of grants in the space. And then also this idea of, there's just been huge conversation lately in, as the table's growing with inclusion of many different people in this space, that action is really a tool to combat climate anxiety and especially among youth, that they want to be, we've talked a lot about it on Clean in the past, that they want to hear first about what is going on and what they can do, not about only that this, the science is really, really important, and it's important to have that, to know, where we are, and like, again, pointing back to that, all the graphs we've seen about the curves, about where we're headed versus where we should be headed, we know that, but that's not always the most powerful place to start the conversation with young people. So yeah, I definitely, in the informal education space, I've seen that shift and that evolution, and I think it in a good way,
So Frank, I had a thought about this. I don't know, you talked about trying to contact this Office of Climate Education and the European effort. This is just a guess on my part, but somebody to ask might be Frank Leopold. I mean, he seems to have at least connections to that larger picture. So he might be somebody to ask about that situation and about ECOS, whether it's actually active or has become less so.
Well, apparently Deb Morrison also knows some of the folks at OCE, so
I wonder if a follow-up conversation, down the road might be just a deeper dive into looking at international, just globally, not just Europe certainly, but other, almost like on a continent by continent basis, what's the landscape look like? That could be an interesting.
That would be interesting to figure out, because I think that there's lots and lots of things. In fact, mapping that out, or at least attempting to, would be an interesting exercise.
One of the follow-up things that Frank and I are working on with the project is AGU is going to be in San Francisco this year, so we're going to have a poster kind of about this exact topic. So it's great to really hear your thoughts, because I think that'll inform the poster session that we're gonna offer in December. Yeah, so really appreciate that.
Which poster session is that, Eric?
At AGU, it's going to be the remote engagement in COP. The same, essentially, Frank presented
yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know who it's under, but I know the time, which is we're Wednesday from 8 to we're going to be Wednesday from 8 to 12:30.
It seems a lot of the climate sessions are on Wednesday.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are, and it's actually nice because then for the poster sessions like that, we're all kind of there doing posters.
And network. Yeah, that's great. Well, and Gina said she's buying us all lunch, so that's great.
Did you really say that, or did you just
I misheard. No.
Wouldn't that be nice?
But speaking of that, actually, Gina and I were chatting a little bit earlier today about do you all, we can ask the larger community as well, but have thoughts around, because so many of the things seem to be kind of conglomerated onto Wednesday. I had the thought of doing the clean, sort of late afternoon, early evening, meetup on either Tuesday or on Wednesday, I figure most people would be there by Tuesday because most of our stuff's on Wednesday, or just doing it on Wednesday when most of our stuff is. But I don't know if people would feel burnt out at the end of Wednesday, or I don't know. Any thoughts on whether you prefer Tuesday or Wednesday for that?
Well, one thing that I want to point out is, because I put it on my calendar, is on Tuesday, at the end of the day, the AGU education section is having a reception that I was planning on going to. So
I plan to attend that as well. That's usually later
It's
later in the evening. It's usually
it's,
like 7 or 8 o'clock. So
It's, well, let's see. Right now, well, of course, I have it in my East Coast time calendar, so it says 9:30, so minus 3 hours. So 6:30 to 7.
oh, that's earlier than usual. Okay, that's good to know.
That is good to know actually, because that's kind of like smack dab in the middle of what might be a dinner time or something.
Yeah, I thought they usually did it more like 7 or 7:30 even. It's interesting.
Yeah, they probably have historically. They seem to be switching up a lot of things this year.
Yeah.
Um,
And also my session on Wednesday is from 4 to 5:30, I think. So
Yeah, that's why I was worried that Wednesday, like I said, things may go kind of late and then yeah. Okay, that's good to know about
Yeah,
that.
and I'm
but I
just,
think finding a time to have a meetup is a great idea, but figuring out what that time is going to be a challenge.
yeah,
It
yeah,
always is.
either from my perspective, either day is good. Maybe Wednesday sounds like might make sense more if that education event's going on. And I'm glad being local to help figure out venues and stuff like that.
thank you. Yeah, and I worried that people might be leaving. I don't know, sometimes people come for only a chunk of it, and Wednesday night may be kind of hard if people are leaving too. That also
Yeah.
kind of worried me, trying to leave
That's what I was
Wednesday night
thinking too.
something. But a lot of people go to the education section meetup, and I don't necessarily want to discourage people from going to that either. So we might, I don't know, maybe Wednesday we just do it. Yeah.
I think maybe if you make it low key and have it long enough, meaning so that if people are in sessions and are going to be late getting there, that it's not over before they get there.
Yeah. Yep. That's true.
Okay. I know we're over time. Sorry to usurp that at the end. Thanks everyone for your thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Frank and Eric, for leading that discussion. It's always really interesting, helpful.
Let me just
Yeah.
throw one thing in really quick.
Yep.
In terms of the question of institutions dealing with advocacy versus just simply education or research. One thing I've got in front of me on my other computer screen is a list of admitted NGOs as observers to COP27. And there are quite a number of universities, research centers, museums in there. Well, UCAR's listed in there, for instance. So anyway, whatever that's worth.
Thank you. All right. Let people go, and thank you very much for leading discussion again. Appreciate it.
Yep, likewise.